Hey, theory students. Today we're going to look at how to construct major scales using, again, the piano and also using our knowledge of major seconds and minor seconds. So remember from last time, I think I mentioned it maybe in passing, but a minor second is the same thing as a half step, and then a major second is the same thing as a whole step. And we're going to use those two intervals to construct scales. And the reason that major scales are important is because those are essentially the keys, and those are the notes that you play as you learn your songs. So as we head over here, I have everything we're going to look at today on the screen right now. And the first thing we're going to look at is tetrachords. So tetrachord, as you see right here, is a scale with 4 notes. Normal major scales have 8 notes within them. And so a major scale is just going to be 2 tetrachords with a whole step between them. So here's, like I highlighted this tetrachord in blue and this tetrachord in red, and then there's a whole step in between them. So let's look at what a tetrachord actually is. So I'm just going to have a set of 4 notes over here. And all your scales are just going to be going up one at a time. And I'll just start with this one. So a tetrachord, here's just a set of 4 notes, starting at middle C and going up 1 note at a time. And if I go over to the piano, we're going to be able to see that this already is a tetrachord in itself. So over here at the piano, I'm starting on a C. So here's a middle C, and I play these 4 notes. Essentially what a tetrachord is do, re, mi, fa. So that's what it is. So you see over here in the notes that between the first and second notes, I have a whole step. Between the second and third notes, I have a whole step. But then between the third and fourth notes, I have a half step. So with our knowledge of solfege, from do to re, there is a note in between there. So that's why this is a whole step. So you can have do and then D, or you have do and then ra and then re. And between re and mi, there's a whole step because there's a note in between there. But then mi and fa, there's no note between them. They are as close together as you can get in normal music, which is a half step. So right here on the piano, we have a C. There's a note in between that and D, and then there's another note between that and E, and then there's no note in here with the next F. So this right here is a tetrachord, okay? Now, if I take all these notes and I move them up just 1, we may have to start adding some accidentals to our notes in order to make it a tetrachord. So let's take a look at this. We start on a D. So from a D to an E, that is in fact a whole step because there's a note in between. But from E to F, that is not a whole step. So what we actually need to do is we need to increase the distance between that second and third note. So we need to actually make it an F sharp, because then that makes this note in between those two. So what you need to do is we need to make this an F sharp. Okay? So now we have those notes. We have D, E, F sharp, so that's 1, 2, 3. Going to our 4th note, we need a half step, which means we're going to go to the next note, which is a G, and that's actually what we have notated up here on the screen. So this, as it's written right now, is a perfectly good tetrachord. All right, let's do another one, and actually I'm going to make this one a bit more complicated. I'm actually going to have us start on an E flat for this one. There we go. So going to the piano, I have an E flat. So my next note is an F. So first ask yourself, is that a whole step? Yes, it was, because there's a note in between there. So we have E flat, and then F natural, and then G. That's still sounding good because there's a note in between there. My next note is an A. That didn't quite sound right. That's not do, re, mi, fa, so something's a little bit weird. And what we discover is between E flat and F is a whole step, between F and G is a whole step, but between G and A is actually a whole step, but we need a half step. So what we do, from this G to this next note, we need the half step. Now this note can be written one of 2 different ways. It can be a G sharp or an A flat. Because up here we're in terms of A, that means we need to write an A flat. Okay? So this here is another tetrachord. Now, if I would write this in terms of G sharp, this would be incorrect because I have two G's, and in a scale, I need it moving from one note to the next. I can't have two of the same notes in a row. So A flat is the correct way of doing that rather than G sharp. All right, let's go ahead and look at one more that is probably going to be a bit more complicated than you really need, but let's do it anyway. And we're going to start on an F sharp. Who would start a scale in F sharp? Only if you're making life painful and hard for you, but we're going to do it anyway. So we start on an F sharp. Between the F sharp and the next note, we need a whole step. So as written, it's a G, but that's only half step, so we're going to need to make this a G sharp. Okay, now we have F sharp, G sharp. Next note is written as an A, but we need a whole step. That's a half step, so we go to A sharp. So we make that, and then we have the next note is a B. So F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B. So hopefully if you heard that, that sounds right, but is it written right? That's what you have to figure out. And this is in fact written correctly. F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and then there's the half step for the tetrachord. Okay, I'm going to pause this video here so that I don't go too long because I'm only allowed 15 minutes on YouTube. Go ahead and watch the next video as well, which is going to be putting two tetrachords together to create a major scale.